This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, jerks?
Manning retired.
Which one?
Both.
I like kickers.
Put him on the board. House Mazzoli. Got it. Championship.
Hello and welcome to the Week 6 edition of the Fantasy Nerds on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, brought to you by the FanUp Network. As always, I am Jason Jarvie, taking you through this fantasy season that just continues to infuriate many, many people. You can follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. Tweet me any questions. I will try to answer them to the best of my abilities. I may not get them all right, but I will give you my opinion on it, and hopefully I can help you out in the process. So we are in week 6, and we're quickly coming to that point where if you are having a dud of a season, you're either going to have to really make a huge turnaround, or you're pretty much done for the year. For any of my fans out there who are 0-5, you have a very slim margin of turning it around. And I don't mean to be mean, but it's just the truth. At 0-5, you're probably going to have to win out to really have a chance at making the playoffs. And the guy on our podcast, Vito Churko, host of Churko & Company, Tiger Talk, he's in this situation 0-5, which it's not hopeless, but there are things that need to happen for you to really turn it around. A lot of it has to do with luck. I talked with Vito on Tuesday, and a lot of the players that he just took, if they would have been doing good, he would have had a completely different season. But he's had a lot of bad luck in the draft, so a lot of turning your season around is based on luck, and you have no control over it. And we talked last week about searching for the waiver wire and trying to put together a trade to help turn around your team. If you do end up losing this game, if you are 0-6 after week 6, even if you're 1-5, it really is time to start throwing things at the wall and hoping something works out. And that's really, it's essentially your Hail Mary play. So, and I'm not talking about throwing away your entire team. I'm not talking about trading away all your good players to one team for a bunch of crap players. No, that's collusion, and I do not condone that at all. But what I am saying is, all the good pieces that you do have on your team, you're going to want to think about trying to move them and maximize the players that you can get back. Try to get, if you have one really good player, try to get at least 2, maybe 3 players from those in a trade. And just try. That's all you can really do, because one of the worst things with fantasy football, when you have guys who are 0-6, 1-5, is that they just give up on the season. They don't check their teams. A lot of times you'll see that they just leave their roster in for the rest of the season because they've chalked it up as a waste. And I beg you all, continue to play, because it's just the spirit of the game. For everybody else who's playing, it's a lot more fun. I'm sure they'd love for you just to lay down, but don't give them that satisfaction. Play for your own respect, and you can still be that spoiler. If somebody has a perfect season, maybe you have that 1 week where you can beat them. If somebody's trying to get into the playoffs, you can ruin their season, and then you can be in misery with them. But we're quickly coming to that with week 6 coming, and with the bottom teams. In a lot of cases in fantasy football, though, unless you have just a wide gap of experience, there really is. It's a fight to get into the playoffs at this point. I know even in the Slackjaw League, there are a couple teams who are 4-1, but there's 4 teams who are 1-4. Had a bunch of bad luck, and then there's a couple teams who are 2-3. So those guys who are 1-4, we're not out of it. We just need to get a couple wins together. So keep the hope alive, and hopefully you can come into some good luck. Thursday Night Football happened yesterday, And it was really surprising. I said the biggest question was, how effective is Trevor Siemian going to be? And you could tell that the Chargers just weren't going to allow the Broncos to play their game. So Trevor Siemian wasn't very effective. It affected Demaryius Thomas's production, Emmanuel Sanders' production. C.J. Anderson couldn't get going, so the Broncos as a whole just didn't have a good game. And Phillip Rivers just methodically moved up and down the field, and he had a decent game. He didn't blow out the Broncos, but they weren't trying to do that. So Thursday Night Football, I think going forward, there's probably still something wrong with Trevor Siemian. He's still getting healthy. And I think in coming weeks, he should be better unless we see just a complete regression from him. Moving on to the matchups for this week, I'm going to start with my hometown team. The Los Angeles Rams are taking on my Detroit Lions. And the Rams have had a interesting season. I don't think anybody really expected them to be where they are. And, Case Keenum, still not a starting quarterback. Still have to mention them because for whatever reason, he's a starting quarterback in the NFL. Todd Gurley, I think he's slowly coming around, and this is a game where you can highlight that Todd Gurley against the Detroit Lions could have a good day. With no DeAndre Levy, he's still out. The Ziggy Ansah could be coming back for the Detroit Lions, which might cause some issues, but that causes more issues for the passing game. So Todd Gurley, I think, is a good start this week. He should have a good week. As bad as Case Keenum is, he has been able to get the ball to a couple of his receivers. You see the Brian Quick has a touchdown here and there, but the two main targets that he has are Tavon Austin and Kenny Britt. And I think they really are, at this point, especially against the Detroit Lions this week, they're flex-worthy. And I'm not saying go out and start them, but when you're looking to comprise your roster this week, Kenny Britt and Tavon Austin have a pretty solid matchup. So if you have nobody who has a better matchup this week, I wouldn't be, throw them in. They may surprise you this week. Anything can happen against the Detroit Lions. On the other side of the ball, you have Matthew Stafford, quarterback of the Detroit Lions. He's as I said yesterday with Phillip Rivers, he's the ultimate fantasy football quarterback. He may not win you an NFL game, but he's definitely going to help you out fantasy-wise. I think Matthew Stafford, he could struggle today. I think he's had some tough luck against the Los Angeles Rams, the St. Louis Rams prior, but they still have Aaron Donald. I think he's going to have a tough time. They have some injuries on the offensive line, so Stafford could be on his back more than we really want him to this week. I think he's a borderline starter. You're probably starting him this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't perform very well. The running backs, Theo Riddick is banged up. He hasn't practiced so far this week, which is concerning because that's the number one guy that you really key in on. And so Dwayne Washington looks like he's good to go. They signed Justin Forsett, but I don't like any of the Lions running backs at the moment. I think I'd probably leave them alone this week. And the only wide receiver for the Lions that I want to start at the moment is Marvin Jones. He's been a breath of fresh air. I think he's exceeded people's expectations to more than really anybody expected because we lost Calvin Johnson and we didn't expect him to come in and really produce as well as Calvin Johnson does or had. And he really has been really good. And I think we all expected that Golden Tate was going to pick up the slack. Tate hasn't been doing anything this year. So Marvin Jones has been the only reliable option for Matthew Stafford and the Lions. And Golden Tate, until he had the last couple minutes of last week where he made a good play, he made the 2-point conversion catch, I leave him on my bench until he proves that he can be a wide receiver again. I'm not putting him in my lineup. Moving on to the next matchup, you have the Philadelphia Eagles at the Washington Redskins. An NFC East matchup should be a hard-fought game. Carson Wentz, I think he's going to look to bounce back from his performance against the Lions last week. And I think he's a borderline starter. I think he he got knocked down a peg against the Lions. And the Redskins, I think they have a pretty solid defense. So Carson Wentz, I think he's right on the borderline of a starting quarterback this week. I personally, I would really need to have I would have to have a pretty awful matchup with my other quarterback to start Carson Wentz over him. Right now on my team, I am actually dealing with, I have Russell Wilson and I have Carson Wentz, and Russell Wilson is the clear better matchup this week. So be on the lookout, Carson Wentz. Darren Sproles is really the only running back that I'd feel comfortable starting on the Philadelphia Eagles. Ryan Matthews, he had the fumble last week, and I think he may have lost some trust of the coaching staff there. So Darren Sproles, I think he's the running back that you want to start, and you don't even really want to start him in a standard league. You're probably only starting him in PPR leagues, but I think Darren Sproles is going to be a key part of the offense this week. And then the only wide receiver you want to start for the Eagles is Jordan Matthews. Even though he didn't have a great game last week, I think he's always going to be the number one option. And you never know, Nelson Aguilar, Josh Huff, they aren't going to give you consistent enough points for you to win games in fantasy. On the other side of the ball, with the Washington Redskins, again, Kirk Cousins, just like Carson Wentz, he's on the border of a starting quarterback. I think if I had to pick between Wentz and Cousins, I'd probably go Carson Wentz. But Kirk Cousins, probably not a starter this week, just because I think the Eagles have had an okay defense. I think the running back, Matt Jones, he has shown in the past couple weeks that he's past his injury, and I think he's at least good enough for a flex position at this point. And then the wide receiver situation, Deshaun Jackson really is the only guy that you want to start on their wide receivers. The one good thing that may come is that Jordan Reed, dealing with a concussion, not sure if he's going to play. And if Jordan Reed is out, it definitely means that there's going to be an uptick for the wide receivers. So that means Deshaun Jackson gets more targets, and that means probably Jamison Crowder and Pierre Garçon may see some more targets. But the only guy that I really feel comfortable starting at this point is Deshaun Jackson. Going on to an NFC South matchup, you have the Carolina Panthers at the New Orleans Saints. The Carolina Panthers, I don't think anybody saw them in the position that they are right now. They're 1-4, and this is the second week in a row that they're taking on an NFC South opponent with only one win, trying to get their second win of the season, going up against the Saints. They're 1-3, and I think it's going to be another hard-fought battle. Last week, they had to deal with no Cam Newton. Derek Anderson is not a starting quarterback anymore. So Cam Newton at the moment, still questionable. They're pretty sure that he's going to play. And which also helps is that Jonathan Stewart, the running back who's been out for the past couple of weeks, he's also likely to play. So you're setting up, if all these guys are healthy and if they are able to play up to their potential, the Panthers could be getting back on a roll. So I think Cam Newton, if he starts, you got to play him. Going up against a Saints defense, they're giving up tons of yards to quarterbacks. So if he plays, you got to start Cam Newton. And then Jonathan Stewart, I think you got to put him in at least as a flex because of what he can do and the way this offense works. Jonathan Stewart is a big part that they use him as that he's the change of pace. A lot of times they have the scat back as the change of pace. I think Jonathan Stewart really is the change of pace as a big bruising running, because they'll throw with Cam and they'll run to the outside, and Jonathan Stewart just pounds it up the middle. So if he's good to go, I think he's at least good enough for a flex. And then, as I said, with Cam Newton, everybody else gets better. So Kelvin Benjamin, I think he's worthy of a start. And Greg Olsen, he's always a starter, regardless of who's playing. I think he still did fine with Derek Anderson last week. So Greg Olsen, you're still starting him. On the other side of the ball, with the New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees, always a starter. You pretty much put him in, and you pencil him in for at least 300 yards and at least 2 touchdowns, if not more. And at this point, you're probably looking at least 1 interception, but he's still a fantasy quarterback starter in every league. Mark Ingram, I think he's been pretty solid this year. He should struggle, though, going up against the Carolina Panthers. So take that into consideration when you're starting him. He's still good enough, though, to be a running back, too. And then I think Brandon Cooks, because they're going up against the Panthers, you still have to respect their defense a little bit. I think Brandon Cooks, he's a wide receiver, too. And I think Willie Snead is in the flex conversation. I don't like them because they're so boom or bust. But then as soon as I tell you to take them out of your lineup, they're going to go off for 10 receptions, 150 yards, and a touchdown each. So I think Cook's wide receiver 2, Snead is a good flex, and I think Kobe Fleener has really moved up. He's earned the trust of Drew Brees, and he's going to be a decent starter at tight end this week. Next matchup I got the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Miami Dolphins. Not a really sexy matchup because I think the Steelers should blow out the Dolphins. Outside of Ndamukong Suh completely destroying the entire Steelers offense, I think the Steelers should win this game. Big Ben, you're definitely starting him. Le'Veon Bell, you're definitely starting him. Antonio Brown, obviously you're starting them. I think this is really one of the only teams where you can convincingly say that all three of their top positions, they're all really good starters. So you're starting all those, and then you can even start another one of those wide receivers. Sammie Coates, he is a little bit banged up, so watch and see if he's healthy or not. If he's healthy, I think you can plug him in at flex. And if not, I think Marcus Wheaton may slide up, and he comes into the conversation when you're trying to decide who should I put at the flex. Because somebody's got to catch the ball on the other side of Antonio Brown. So if it's not Sammie Coates, it'll probably be Marcus Wheaton. On the other side of the ball, Miami Dolphins, not that good. Ryan Tannehill, not a starter. He just hasn't progressed enough to be a fantasy quarterback. Arian Foster, he could start this week. They're saying that he's looking good, but I don't trust him. I just don't. He got hurt at the beginning of the season, and we all knew that was going to happen. And there's nobody else behind him. Jay Ajayi, Kenyan Drake, nobody's doing enough fantasy-wise to be productive. And the only wide receiver that you can start in a week-in, week-out basis on the Dolphins is Jarvis Landry. And even him, I think he's starting to drop off. So I'd really be wary of Jarvis Landry. And if he really continues to slump the way that he has the past couple of weeks, he could come back and prove me wrong and have a huge game this week. I'm not predicting a big game, though, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then next matchup, I got the Cincinnati Bengals at the New England Patriots. The big story is obviously Tom Brady. Tom Brady came back, had a huge game last week, threw 3 touchdowns, all to Martellus Bennett. I think Tom Brady is just going to continue it. He is on a revenge tour. I think they may win out the rest of the season because Tom Brady is just that good. So Tom Brady, probably one of the best, if not the best starters this week, even going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. And then the running back situation for the Patriots, LeGarrette Blount, it's not a great matchup, but it's that same situation as I said last week, where if the Patriots can get up big against the Cincinnati Bengals, they're going to start running the ball, and they're going to hand it off to LeGarrette Blount. So I think LeGarrette Blount slides down into the flex conversation this week, and I think James White might actually be a more interesting play this week because the Patriots, they always seem to, it goes in a circle on who's going to get the most production. And you saw last week that Martellus Bennett had the big week with the 3 touchdowns, and then Chris Hogan also a little bit. So they may switch this week and go to the running game and passing out of the backfield. So James White is a sleeper this week for me. Julian Edelman, you got to be careful. He's still dealing with an injury. If he is healthy, I think you still have to put him in at least as a wide receiver 2, maybe in the flex position. And then Chris Hogan, another guy who I think is a sleeper. You saw him last week that Tom Brady does depend on him, and he could have a pretty good game here or there. Going on to the tight end position, I think it's a toss-up. Martellus Bennett had the big week. Rob Gronkowski seems to be healthy. I think you probably start both of these guys and just in hopes that they split it most weeks. Where last week Martellus Bennett gets the 3 touchdowns, there's going to be a week where Gronk gets those 3 touchdowns and Bennett doesn't produce. But I think they use the tight end enough in the Patriots organization that you should probably be starting both of these guys at this point. Going over to the Cincinnati Bengals, Andy Dalton, I think he's a borderline starter. I think he's definitely going to struggle going up against the Patriots. But the one good thing you got to hope is that maybe the Bengals get down and then Andy Dalton has to pass the ball, and then it's on him to produce for you. I don't like him as a starter this week, though. I think of the 2 running backs, Jeremy Hill, a little banged up. I like Giovanni Bernard because if they're going to have to pass to get back in this game, I think you're going to see a lot more Giovanni Bernard. So I think he's a borderline starter. I think running back 2, flex position again. I'd probably leave Jeremy Hill on the bench this week just because the Patriots have been shutting down running backs so far. AJ Green is a guy that you have to start every week. I think he's still going to be a decent starter this week. And then a sleeper at wide receiver, I think Brandon LaFell. He had a pretty solid game the last week. And if AJ Green is covered, they're going to have to throw the ball. And hopefully it goes to Brandon LaFell. I'm not saying he's great. And if you have a better option, I'd put him in over Brandon LaFell. But keep an eye on him. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll wrap up the rest of this week's matchups I have outlined for you, and then I'll give you my sits and starts. You're listening to the Fantasy Nerds on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The Fantasy Nerd Show is sponsored by the FanUp Network. They've developed the ultimate fantasy football app. It's a one-stop shop for everything you need. You can track teams and scores across multiple platforms, get latest injury and player news and access to expert advice, see the hot trends with waiver pickups and drops. It has everything you need to manage all your fantasy football teams. Android users can get the app in the Play Store, and an iPhone version is now available in the App Store. Go to fanupnetwork.com to learn more and follow them on Twitter at fanupnetwork.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Nerds. Let's wrap up the rest of this week's matchups and get on to starts and sits. I was looking at this week's slate of games, and the 4 o'clock games really are the games that you want to watch. They actually have really good matchups. And I'll start it out with probably the worst matchup of the bunch, but the rest of these are pretty high profile. You got the Kansas City Chiefs at the Oakland Raiders. I think Alex Smith, he's a sleeper in this game, coming off of a bye and going up against an Oakland Raiders team who they give up a ton of points. They give up yards to quarterbacks. I think Alex Smith could be a sleeper. You saw what he did against Cincinnati in game 1, and he's definitely declined from that point. I think if there's going to be a game where Alex Smith goes off, I think going up against a fellow AFC West rival, he's going to go off here. So I think Alex Smith, he's a sleeper quarterback this week. And then going to the running back, Jamaal Charles, they're still working back from that injury. And even though he started the before the bye, he didn't really have a huge role. And they're still saying that they're easing him back in. So I don't feel comfortable at this point really starting Jamaal Charles. If anything, maybe at a flex, because if Jamaal Charles can be fully healthy, he's a really good option. And until, I think it's just going to be so muddied, that running back situation. So I don't like really starting Jamaal Charles or Spencer Ware. If I have to, I probably put him in the flex situation. For the wide receivers, I think, as I said, Alex Smith could have a big day against the Oakland Raiders. I think the one wide receiver you want to target is Jeremy Maclin because he's the number one option. He's the one who's probably going to have the big day. Smith could spread the ball around, and you could see some of the other Kansas City wide receivers produce. But Jeremy Maclin, I think, is the one guy you can feel comfortable putting in, and he's probably going to give you at least, hopefully, 5 to 7 catches with 80 to 100 yards, hopefully a touchdown there. And then I think Travis Kelce, he's always a solid tight end option for the Chiefs, especially when they're going to be passing the ball. On the opposite side of the ball with the Oakland Raiders, I think Derek Carr, he's been pretty good up to this point, but I think he's still on the border right now of starters, especially going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. They have a pretty decent secondary, and he could struggle a little bit unless they really need to get back in the game. So I think Derek Carr, I'm not starting him unless I really have to this week. And the running back situation, Latavius Murray, he's looking to be questionable again. They may be without their number one running back again. So Jalen Richard, I don't think he's good enough to be a starter just yet, but keep your eye on him. But if Latavius Murray comes back in the week after, Jalen Richard becomes an afterthought. And then I think Amari Cooper is the wide receiver that's going to struggle this week. I think if Derek Carr is throwing the ball around, Amari Cooper is going to be covered by the top defensive back on the other side of the ball. So the guy that I do like starting this week is Michael Crabtree. He's shown that he's been probably the most consistent option so far. Amari Cooper, you're likely still starting him because he's still going to produce, but I like Michael Crabtree to have the better day this week for the Oakland Raiders. Going on to the next matchup, we have the Atlanta Falcons at the Seattle Seahawks. And I said last week that you pretty much have to ride Matt Ryan until he drops. And I'm going to stick with that, is that you just ride Matt Ryan until he has a bad game. And you may have to forfeit that one if he really just craps out. But Matt Ryan has been a really good fantasy quarterback. He's been a good NFL quarterback this entire season. And when he went into Denver to play them, I expected the Denver just to shut him down, and he proved us wrong. We expected him to do bad against Carolina. He proved us wrong again. So why think any differently against a really good Seattle Seahawks defense? He should struggle against them, but I think you still ride him. I think Matt Ryan has proved us that he can overcome some adversity. So I think Matt Ryan's still at least in the top 10 of fantasy quarterbacks this week. Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman, I think that's a different story. I think they're probably going to struggle. Devontae, the saving grace for both of them is their pass catching ability, and I like them in PPR this week still. And if I'm probably only starting Devontae Freeman, Tevin Coleman, I think this is a game where you sit on the bench maybe. But if you really have to, I don't hate putting him in as a flex in PPR situations because there's always the possibility that Matt Ryan just needs to dump it down and then Tevin Coleman gets a bunch of junk yardage. And then going to, Julio Jones, I think he could struggle going up against Richard Sherman. But as Matt Ryan has shown, he's able to spread the ball around. And that's why I don't really like any of the other Falcons wide receivers or receiving options, because the main options are Julio Jones, and then it's going to go Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. And anybody after that, probably not going to get enough yards to really affect a fantasy game. So Julio Jones, you're still going to start him, but I think he's not going to have a great day going up against Richard Sherman all day long. On the other side of the ball, with the Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson, definitely a starter. I think he's pretty much moved past his injury, and I think he's going to have some success against this Atlanta Falcons defense. The running back also, I think Christian Michael should have a better day. He didn't have a great week against the New York Jets, but they have a really good run defense. I think he should have a better day against this Atlanta Falcons run defense. And then I think Doug Baldwin I think because Russell Wilson is going to be a good start this week, I think Doug Baldwin is good, and I think Jimmy Graham, both of those guys should be pretty productive in this game. Moving on to what could be arguably the game of the week this week, you have the Dallas Cowboys traveling to Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers, two of the top teams in the NFC North, and I think there's some question marks on both sides of the ball. Dak Prescott, the rookie quarterback, I think he's a borderline starter. I think he could struggle against this Green Bay defense, and I'm likely not starting him in most fantasy situations. But in the right situation, maybe I start him. More than likely, he's on the outside of the top 10, though. I think Ezekiel Elliott, though, is a completely other story. Another rookie. He is a must-start at this point. He is one of those there's not a lot of fantasy running backs at the moment who are absolute must-starts, running back ones. Ezekiel Elliott is that right now. You start him in any situation, regardless of who he's playing. So, Elliott, you're starting. And then Des Bryant, not likely to be back again for this week. And I don't like any of the wide receivers this week. I've said before, I talked about Cole Beasley and Terrence Williams before. And Dak Prescott had a pretty solid game the past couple weeks. I don't like the wide receivers this week. I don't think they're going to provide enough for you fantasy players. On the other side of the ball, with the Packers, a must start. Aaron Rodgers, regardless of who he's playing, he could go off for a gigantic day. And I think Aaron Rodgers, you're always going to start him. Eddie Lacy, though, he's been dealing with an injury, and he's not 100%. He's dealing with the ankle injury that he suffered last week. And what's coming out of practice is that he should be good to go, but I definitely think regardless if he plays or not, he'll probably be limited at best. So I think you're going to see a split between Eddie Lacy and James Starks if he plays. And then I do like James Starks in a PPR format because I see them having to throw the ball a bunch, and James Starks could be in a lot of those passing downs. Jordy Nelson, I think he's really returned to form. I think he'll probably be in mid-season form by now with after the bye week. So Jordy Nelson, he's definitely a starter. And if I target any of the other wide receivers, I'm probably going Randall Cobb. And I think he comes into that flex conversation. Even though he hasn't had the best season so far, I think you still got to put Randall Cobb there. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, you have the Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. And I think I'm going to pinpoint this game as the game that Andrew Luck could break out. I told you in the King's Decrees that I thought Andrew Luck is going to struggle the first part of the season and then come on hot really late. And I think this could be the point where Andrew Luck, the Colts are still in this, their season isn't over yet. And I think this is one of those games that Andrew Luck could really just take over and have a really big game. So I like Andrew Luck this week. And then Frank Gore, he's not a sexy pick, but he's been solid enough to at least be a running back too. So you're probably still starting him. And then the T.Y. Hilton, as much as I doubt him, he's their number one guy. And Andrew Luck is always going to find him. So I like T.Y. Hilton this week. Not big on any of the other options because Andrew Luck is one of those guys. He's going to spread the ball around. So T.Y. Hilton is the only guy who's going to get enough to really help you fantasy-wise. On the other side of the ball with the Houston Texans, on one hand, Brock Osweiler has not been good, and he hasn't been a really good fantasy starter, but going up against these Indianapolis Colts, he could have a better week this week. I think he's gone up against some tough defenses, and the Indianapolis Colts have a ton of injuries on their side of the ball. So Brock Osweiler could be a sneaky play this week. I don't really like him as a starter, but I'm saying he could be a sneaky play. And with running backs, they've just hammered the ball with Lamar Miller, so I think they're going to continue to do that, and maybe Lamar Miller will finally have a breakout game. DeAndre Hopkins, you're still going to start him every week. He's been getting the majority of the targets, along with Will Fuller, which I think he's a pretty decent flex option. So you got a lot of guys in this game who you're going to probably start in fantasy football. And then to close out the matchups, we got the Monday Night Football, New York Jets going to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. And I think it's going to be a really, really tough day for the New York Jets this week. Ryan Fitzpatrick, he held out all preseason to get his money. He got his money, and he was really betting on himself. And he may have missed the mark on that one because he has not had a really good first 5 weeks of the season. And I think it's just going to get tougher going up against this Arizona Cardinals defense, who the Cardinals, they're a team that needs to win. They had Super Bowl potential, and they're 2-3 right now. So they're going to be coming out at home on Monday Night Football. It's going to be a tough day for Ryan Fitzpatrick. And that also doesn't bode well for Matt Forte, he started out the year hot, and I think he's just been slowing down. His age has really shown, And I'm not even sure if he's going to get the bulk of the running back touches. I think Bilal Powell is really starting to eat in. And so I don't like any of the Jets running backs. The wide receiver situation it's tough because Eric Decker is still dealing with an injury. I think Brandon Marshall, just because he's going to be matched up against really good defensive backs. Brandon Marshall, I think he's a low-end wide receiver too, because Fitzpatrick is still going to have to throw the ball to somebody, so he'll probably get it to Brandon Marshall at least a couple times. Hopefully he can get you a touchdown. And then I think Quincy Enunwa, as good as he's been all year, I think he's a really, really low-end flex play this week. If anything, if you can, I'd probably leave him on your bench going up against the Arizona Cardinals. And it's completely the opposite on the other side of the ball with the Arizona Cardinals, because this is a team that needs to win, and they have all the talent to do it. I think Carson Palmer, if he's healthy, he's going to come in and he'll probably shred this New York Jets defense, who they got shredded by Pittsburgh. So I think Palmer, if he plays, I think Palmer has a big day. Drew Stanton, if he is the guy who has to be the starter, I'm not starting him. But Palmer, I think you definitely plug him into your lineup if he's healthy. David Johnson, probably one of the only other running backs outside of Ezekiel Elliott who is a must start at this point. He's a guy who, again, I hate to admit it, I thought that it was all smoke and mirrors for David Johnson, but he's proven that he is one of the best running backs right now in the league. So David Johnson, you're starting him, even though it might be a tough matchup against the New York Jets. And then the wide receivers that I would highlight for the Cardinals would be Larry Fitzgerald. He's gonna, I doubted him last week and he proved me wrong. So Larry Fitzgerald, you're still starting him every week. And the other wide receiver that I like as a really good flex option is John Brown. He's a guy who's come on after his injury. I think he has a better trust with Carson Palmer than Michael Floyd or really any of the other wide receivers. So I think after Larry Fitzgerald and David Johnson, you're going to see John Brown get production. And I think John Brown has a pretty solid week this week. So that wraps up the matchups. I wish you all the best of luck this week. That about wraps up the show, but I can't leave you without giving you my starts and sits of the week. Now, last week I definitely took a hit with my starts and sits predictions. I went 2-4, and there were some close ones. I told you to start Carson Wentz. He didn't have a bad day, but he didn't have a great day, so I had to give me a loss on that one. The LaShawn McCoy, he had 150 yards, no touchdowns. I told you to sit him. Wasn't the best. DeAndre Hopkins, I told you to sit him. He had 5 for 56 and a touchdown, which, it was probably good enough for a starter, but I still told you to sit him. So I'm trying to be fair. So hopefully I can do better this week. So we're starting off with the quarterbacks. I talked about it. I think Alex Smith is a really good sleeper quarterback this week, and I think he is good enough to start going up against the Oakland Raiders. And on the other side, again, I hate to say it, but he's my hometown quarterback. I would sit Matthew Stafford this week, going up against the Los Angeles Rams, who have been surprisingly decent so far. I think Stafford could have trouble going up against this team, and I wouldn't be surprised if he only gets to 200 yards and has at least 1 or 2 interceptions. He'll probably get a ton of sacks, which you don't get marked down for, but I think you sit Matt Stafford this week. Going on to the running backs, I think James White, the New England Patriots running back, the guy who's going to catch the ball out of the backfield, he's going to be the good play this week. Outside of LeGarrette Blount, I think going up against Cincinnati, James White is the guy that you want to start. So that's why I have him as my start of the week at running back. And at sit, it's not a huge pick, but Jordan Howard, he has been ranked pretty high on the running back ranking so far, this week at least. I've seen him in the top 10. The Chicago Bears running back going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars actually have a decent defense at the moment, so I think Jordan Howard could have a less than stellar day this week. And going on to the wide receivers, I just talked about him with the Cardinals. I think John Brown, he's going to be really productive going up against the Jets. Larry Fitzgerald or Michael Floyd is probably going to be the guy who's matched up with Darrelle Revis. So John Brown, I think he could really surprise you, and he could have a really big day this week. So that's why I have him as my start at wide receiver. And my sit, it's the same game. Brandon Marshall going up against that Arizona defense. He'll be matched up against either Patrick Peterson, who's one of the best cornerbacks in the game, or Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, another great cornerback in this league. So I think Brandon Marshall could have a down game this week, and that's why I have him as my sit of the week at wide receiver. That wraps up my starts and sits, and that just wraps up this episode of the Fantasy Nerds, Week 6. I wish you all the best of luck. I am Jason Jarvie. Follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. Tweet me your questions Sunday morning. I'll try and help you out the best I can. Until next time, later, nerds.